Welcome back to my art channel. Today I'm sketching with my favorite set of oil pastels. But only using limited color palettes. Oil pastels are wonderful for master studies, so I'll be going over Baroque paintings, see how far these different limited color palettes get me, and how these combine and compare with other oil pastel brands. The oil pastels I'm talking about are by the Korean brand Hwawon. They are created by an artist inspired by botanical illustration, so the color selection reflects that. Why am I looking at only a limited color palette from these today? The Hwawon oil pastels come in 96, 48 and 24 color sets, as well as selling individual shades here in Korea. While I own the largest set, sadly, these are no longer getting produced, so I wanted to take a look at what the smaller sets had to offer by limiting myself and swatching only those colors. As the whole reason I love these oil pastels is the unique muted pastel color palette, I was worried the smaller sets would take away from that uniqueness. Often, smaller sets only include basic shades. You know what I mean, the blues and reds and greens and yellows, maybe in a warm and cool or light and dark version each. It makes sense, but would kind of defeat the purpose for this flower garden inspired brand. Once I looked up the shade numbers and started swatching, that quickly calmed my worries. Yes, the shade range is of course much reduced, but instead of going with the most basic colors available, these really stick with the original vision. More greens and muted pinks than anything else, with both high chroma and low chroma versions, lights and darks, while also including point colors like an intense violet. Even from just swatching this first limited palette, the set of 24 shades, you can see that these have quite a unique texture, less creamy and buttery than other oil pastels, but build up into a completely smooth surface. This is the second reason I like these so much. They are less messy than any other oil pastels I've tried. This smallest set includes some of their signature colors, and my personal favorites, like the green tea latte shade and jujube, a Korean type of date, the 124 black sesame porridge, and the 186 bronze age tulle, a deep green gray. It's interesting that there's neither a white nor a black in this set, so I was curious how this would feel when drawing with them. But I can see the vision. Instead of going for those shades, they had room for gray tones, highlights with both warm and cool undertones, and overall more variety. When I started to swatch the 48 color palette, I somehow assumed that there would be a lot of duplicates, only to then realize that this was a nearly completely different selection of colors. Some of those standout shades like green tea latte return, but there are a lot of subtle differences here. A big shift is the larger focus on beige and brown tones, and warmer undertones overall. An expansion of the already varied green palette, but also including more bright oranges and some blue tones, and a white and charcoal shade. So the 48 color set is overall more complete in itself, but still keeps the distinct flowers and greenery theme alive by giving us a lot of variety there. Instead of what I'd expected, a 24-24 color split, I counted a total of 10 duplicate shades by the end, mostly on the darker side of the shade range, so this set includes 38 completely new colors. As the Hwawon oil pastels can be a bit tricky to find internationally, I wanted to, of course, compare them to some of my other oil pastels and see what we could substitute for these. I tested the Mungyo Gallery oil pastels next to them, another Korean brand and probably the staple oil pastel brand here. I've collected a lot of their more muted shades beyond the 72 color box. This is why I usually dislike those smaller color sets, especially when it comes to a medium like oil pastels, which rely more on individual color sticks than color mixing. A watercolor palette with 24 colors in it would feel beyond complete, can mix anything easily. But for oil pastels, that might feel more limiting. A lot of brands only include these more muted, low chroma, desaturated or pale alternatives to a pure white in their largest sets. Anyway, the Mungyo are softer than the Hwawon, not building up to that same flat, nearly glass-like finish. Actually quite a good alternative if you can get those rarer pastel shades. The Caran Neocolor I have here is much drier, but if you like the drawing tool aspect of the Hwawon, this might be an interesting alternative, focusing even more on that detailed approach. I only have a few Sennelier oil pastels that I bought as single sticks. These are famously buttery and soft, practically melting under my touch, for an opposite experience to the Hwawon. So not a close match at all, but if you prefer that softer, creamier style, that's of course a positive. And they do have a huge color selection to pick from. One of their smaller sets, also 24 colors, is themed for portraits, and that one has a selection of more muted, portrait-friendly shades, though very limited of course to reds, browns and a few blues, completely lacking any greens. If you're looking for more of those, their still life set might be a better fit, which looks very much like the kinds of colors I generally enjoy. I also tried out the Caran Neopastel, a new addition to my collection with just a couple to try out, but texture-wise these might actually be the closest match to the Hwawon ones. They build up similarly, feeling a bit dry and even a bit less tacky than the Hwawon, so I'm actually curious to give these a closer look in the future. Their set of 24 colors is a very standard, well-balanced color composition, with a few beige, grey and muted green tones for variety. The colors that really interest me are, sadly, only in their full set of 96 colors, which is a bit of an investment. They don't seem to have any themed sets like a portrait set or still life or landscape set yet. Overall, I'd place the Hwawon between the Mungyo Gallery and Caran Neopastel when it comes to texture and application. Very different from the much creamier Sennelier, and not as precise and dry as a Neocolor. And in the end, it's really their color selection that sets them apart. So let's give that a test, especially to see if that small 24 color set holds up as well. Looking at the color selection while swatching, I found myself thinking of Baroque paintings. Lush greens that vanish into darkness, pinks and ochres for figures, and then the brighter jewel tones for clothing or color accents. We already know that these colors are made for botanical illustration, so I'd rather try out something different with them and push their limits. My first color study is by Jean-Honoré Fragonard, The Swing. Such a beautiful dreamlike painting that the Hwawon color palette seemed the perfect fit for. I'll only be using the colors from the 48 color box for this first study. Its dark greens and muted blues were perfect for blocking in the forest background, and the bright, warm-toned chartreuse, which can almost look jarring at first, really captures the feeling of sunlight hitting foliage. Oil pastels are the perfect medium for when I want to let go, want to focus on the overall composition or colors instead of getting lost in details, as I usually do. They force me to simplify my studies until they are barely anything but specks of color. But if it goes well, the essence of the painting's color palette shines through, and I can learn from seeing it broken down into these simple components. The Hwawon oil pastels focus a lot on these very light pastel shades for each part of the color wheel. Blending with those instead of a white shade can very subtly alter our more intense or dark colors. Even in the 48 color set, we have light mauves, pinks, beige and a light jade color to blend with, on top of the actual white and 2 gray tones. The grays came in really handy when blending and mixing the blues, creating gradients with those as there are fewer shades available than, for example, greens. The set of 24 colors also comes equipped with these light blending shades: the 191 Thick Fog, 150 Melon Milk and 153 White Green, with warm and cool undertones respectively, and 118 Cotton Candy. So when I moved on to the next study, those helped me in creating color variety despite the set limitation. This felt almost more like a graphic design exercise than a painting exercise, if that makes sense. I didn't bother with blending or gradients, just try to find abstract shapes. The chartreuse green and pinks together look really beautiful and create a vibrant color contrast, and I also found that I didn't miss a pure white at all. Throughout these color studies, you'll see me blend with only the oil pastels. The Hwawon work really well that way. They are not so soft that we overblend or create a mess. And even at this very small scale, I could keep sharp edges and blocks of uniform color to simplify the composition, and didn't feel the need for any blending tools. For the next master study, I picked a painting by François Boucher, La Nymphe Callisto, but despite the different color palette, stuck with my limited 24 shade box here. the very intense 142 jujube, a type of Korean date, is an amazing inclusion for this limited palette, as depending on what I mix with it, it can create orange or deep red hues, and the bright pink 125 Cosmos really goes well with it. For these warmer tones, I used the 105 Field Marigold shade to warm up all those pink hues and layered blues and greys for the cooler background elements. Again, not having access to a white made sure I actually looked at the values of the painting. A pure white is rarely found in Baroque art, so in a way it kept my urge to go too light in check. This went really quickly and showed me some composition tricks I might have missed otherwise if I were using a more complex color palette. Placing a blue textile to frame the limbs of the figure in an otherwise warm environment, how the figures melt into a single, nearly triangular shape, and how the background oscillates between warm and cool shadows for contrast. That's why these very small, limited color studies can be so helpful as a quick art study method. I love that oil pastel studies, especially small ones, show these individual brush marks. The texture keeps the study alive, though I also like the flatter, what I'd called graphic designish approach from earlier. For the next and final thumbnail, I went back to not only the 48 color box, but using everything, the 24 and 48 box together. It's a study of a Rubens painting. So dark, warm shadows, many figures mingling and layering and contorting, and all the beige and ochre shades from the 48 color box came in very handy for those. Mixing reds by combining the jujube shade with the purer pinks and the 111 shade named Camellia of Jeju Island created those deep red cloths that drape over the image, as well as intense shadows. Now, you might wonder, why are these sets now discontinuing? Hwawon is a popular brand in South Korea after all. Currently, the 96 color boxes are already sold out on all the big Korean art supply online shops, and some of their most popular shades as single sticks are also marked as unavailable. While I don't have any insider information, Hwawon doesn't know I exist, I think, and none of this is sponsored. I did dig around a bit on their social media and website. What started as a very small-scale production of these oil pastels created by the artist behind the brand to suit her personal tastes when it comes to colors and illustrations was supposed to be scaled up in a new, larger manufacturing facility. During the development process, scaling up and making sure quality remains consistent with the previous production is key there. Hwawon was working with a manufacturing facility or company on an MOU basis, a Memorandum of Understanding, or 양해각서 in Korean, for this preliminary process, planning to then move into production together. Towards the end of development, the manufacturer allegedly declined to continue, wanting to launch their own product line instead. That's what I could gather at least, and I'm no expert on production processes or the Korean laws surrounding them, though MOU are very common here. So from what I can tell, Hwawon was left without a production facility after putting a lot of time and resources into actually setting it up, and also now with the risk of their knowledge, colors and materials no longer being solely their own, and they had to halt production. I'm not sure if they'll be back with the same or a new iteration of these oil pastels, or can solve the issue somehow. But I just wanted to add that as context here. These aren't disappearing because they weren't popular or because of quality issues, but seemingly because of manufacturing and legal issues behind the scenes of that process. Again, just what I could gather. I'm really sad that they'll be, for now, discontinued. but as these smaller sets are still available and I've been itching to use mine more, I wanted to share the love for them here. With all the different figures crowded here, it was difficult to keep the value changes consistent. I think the central figure should be lighter, the one to the left a bit darker, but then I'd have to darken everything else all over again, and I just kept it as is. Maybe I'll give this one a more careful try, at a larger size, with watercolors, as it really brings a lot of elements together that I'd love to study more. For example, how to efficiently and beautifully use black color in a painting. I wouldn't be me if there weren't a portrait in this video, right? I just wanted to sketch one more little thing to fill up the page and spotted this painting here that looked like another great fit for the Hwawon colors. We're going back to François Boucher, but this time looking at a painting of Madame de Pompadour. Whereas my other sketches so far have been pure color studies, very simplified but with little creative editing on my end, here I brought my own personal portrait style to it, but using the color palette of the original painting as a base. The background is a simple mixture of all those different green tones this color selection brings us. And then, to contrast with those, I exaggerated the pinks on her face, a complementary color contrast. I'm going back to just the 24 color set for this one, by the way. I also reached for 2 Mungyo Gallery oil pastels when blending the colors here to see how the Hwawon would combine with them. Using an ivory white and an ivory, both warmer than a pure white, was perfect for blending those pink hues. And the slightly heavier texture of the Mungyo combined well with the smooth finish of the Hwawon pastels. I think if you give this small set just 1 or 2 additions, maybe a beige or ivory like I'm using here, from the Neopastel or Mungyo Gallery line, those would play together quite nicely. The shade 140 called Buckwheat Brown has a slight violet undertone, a cool medium brown that was perfect for details and shadows on her face, and combined beautifully with the 124 Black Sesame Porridge. I really like how this little portrait turned out, and the colors are a perfect fit for late spring. Maybe I can turn the portrait sketch into a little print for Patreon, and maybe even make stickers out of some of those master studies. I love when the oil pastel texture still shows up on prints, and have made art prints and stickers from my oil pastel art in the past, so this would be quite cute in my mind. So I'm kind of excited to give that another try. Sketching with these made me realize how much I'd missed my oil pastels. I taught a couple classes over winter, but it's actually in spring that I feel in the mood for color experiments again and reach for pastels the most. The smaller Hwawon sets both look promising from my color experiments here. They offer a wide variety of colors without becoming generic sets, sticking to the core inspiration of a floral color palette. All the muted and light tones are great for blending, and I like them for both painterly and sketchy approaches. I'm really sad that the Hwawon oil pastels will be discontinued. But despite the pressure I use these with, they don't use up quickly. They're not very creamy but quite solid, and even my most used colors are still in great condition, so I hope my set will last me for a long time. While I might stock up on a few favorite shades while I still can, some of those grey tones or muted greens for example, I'm hopeful that despite their manufacturing troubles, Hwawon oil pastels will be back one day. Maybe they'll be a bit different, but I think the brand identity of their color choices is very strong and cohesive, and no matter what they create, I'll be there to test it out. These landscapes I painted on panel with just the Hwawon oil pastels really show how smooth they can be. I used quite a lot of pressure to create these surfaces, and even now after a couple of years and dragging them around, not always super carefully, to small exhibits around Jeju Island, the surface still holds up. The color names are very evocative, and so each of these landscapes is inspired by and named after one of the shades. And the print set I made from these is actually my best-selling art product here in Korea. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next art video.